and continue to practice social distancing when you have to leave your home.
We are talking about this strange little movie called Quarantine Girl. This one is written by and is co-directed by Nicole, and she plays the character of Ruby, who is our kind of central protagonist. And this takes place, we are led to believe, in the early stages of the coronavirus pandemic. It never actually calls it coronavirus, but you can kind of get the gist. This is where it's going from, because everything else is more or less kind of the same. And it tells the story of Ruby, who is a young woman who has just come home after a business trip. And she lives on her own, and it's her dealing with the growing kind of paranoia and fear from this kind of virus, getting her information from the media, and ultimately having to deal with it from a mental health perspective, and ultimately trying to show her struggles whilst feeling kind of isolation and all this kind of thing. There are a few other peripheral characters that we'll talk about in a little bit, but that's your basic kind of setup of the story. Very, very low budget, clearly filmed during the kind of the pandemic. What can we say that works? I think its heart is in the right place. At the end of the movie, there is some text ultimately saying to people, you know, if you are struggling with mental illness, and that there are people there to help you ultimately. Now, interestingly enough, I'm actually watching this Quarantine Girl movie whilst I am in quarantine. I'm actually in a 10-day quarantine because I have been in contact with someone who has the virus. Apparently, in the UK, we have like an app that kind of tells you if you've been in contact, and I have been flagged as I've come in contact with someone. So I myself am in quarantine whilst I am watching this Quarantine Girl movie. Not really a comment on the film, but just a little factoid for you. So what else can I say that maybe works in this movie? I think the idea is an interesting one, and I feel this would be better suited to a movie at the other end of the kind of the pandemic, when we kind of have a full scope of maybe what has happened and how it has affected people on a kind of a mental health basis. And I'm sure we will get them. I'm sure we will have movies. So I think there is an idea here to have, that is, a relevant and probably timely movie that would show you the effects maybe that, social isolation and kind of fear and paranoia can have on the human psyche. But maybe this came out a bit too soon, to be fair, and I don't think it does a particularly good job with it, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But I think the idea is solid. Ruby herself seems like somewhat of a likeable kind of character, played by D'Angelo. The cast is relatively minimal outside of her. But, to be honest, this movie falls in very many other kind of scenarios and kind of in different ways. For one, there's no real plot to this movie. It's just, we've all experienced this. The whole world has gone through this pandemic. So we all have personal stories about how we have had to deal with, dealing with the early days of the pandemic, and, finding out the information and things like that. So I don't think this is going to be news to anyone. And it doesn't really offer anything other than just a kind of a basic look at someone having to deal with the early days of a virus, if that makes sense. The movie doesn't try and do anything else with the plot. It just is this kind of woman on her own, and that's basically it. There's no other plot. There's no narrative in it, to be honest. Well, there's an attempt, but we'll talk about that. So the movie seems somewhat pointless, I have to say. I think it's showing you her mental breakdown is poorly handled. At one point she just kind of gets weird and starts talking to herself and these kind of cardboard cutouts that keep getting sent to her. And it's not really, I don't think it's really kind of showing you that maybe the depression and things like this. And I feel it's badly handled and a little misguided, the way that kind of the mental health issues are dealt with within this movie, considering obviously this is something that is still literally happening as I'm filming this review. And there are people who are struggling a lot with it. I don't know, it just seems somewhat ill-judged. I think the what's the saying? The road for hell is paved with good intention. I think the intentions are good here, but I don't know if it handled it in a particularly tasteful way, to be honest. She's just kind of going cuckoo and sort of talking to herself and stuff, and I don't know, it wasn't really a depiction of kind of isolation and loneliness and paranoia that I think would really be particularly suitable. It also has this weird chirpy music that kind of plays that almost makes it feel like a comedy at times. Let's talk about some of the peripheral characters. Every guy in this movie seems to be like some kind of lecherous stalker. We have delivery guys that are delivering various things from Amazon. They always want to peek through our windows and stuff like that, and it doesn't go anywhere. There's no relevance to them. They just do it. And she has this love interest with this guy called Nate, who we're told that he's like some expert in virology, but whenever we see him at his desk, he's just got like pictures of like, it looks like it's filmed in a low budget film office, and he's got pictures of like B movies and things behind him. You never actually know what he actually does. It looks like he works in the film industry, but for some reason he's some expert on this kind of stuff. And then we are meant to believe that there is this kind of like touching love story between them, but he is literally spying on her through her laptop and stuff. This is never set up. We just see him spying on her through her laptop, but then some other cameras. We don't know how he's managed that. We don't know what the cameras that he is looking through outside of the the laptop. It's completely not established. And yet it's at the end of the story, spoilers here, it's just brushed under the carpet. So pretty much every guy here is just is a creep, but even our love interest, it's just weird. Her best friend, who keeps phoning her at just kind of like the opportune times with a very annoying ringtone, I have to say. And then the funny thing is that she'll pick up, like, Ruby will pick up the phone for a voice call, but then we'll see a video call from the other woman, and I'm thinking, well, that's not a video call because you're speaking directly in the phone. It's some just a little less attention to details here. The acting is pretty poor, I have to say. For this movie, or a movie like this to work, it really needs to have very, very good acting. You're not, if you're just watching one person in a room, you've got that person's got to be captivating and dramatic, and this isn't the case. There's also just some some kind of weird omissions here. They never call it coronavirus or COVID, and they say it's come from the East. Very, very vague. There's a B plot where she keeps getting things from Amazon that she hasn't ordered. And I was thinking, is this going to be like, the virus is going to be coming through these Amazon packages? No, it's a plot point that is completely not addressed. She's just getting stuff from Amazon that she hasn't ordered. And then I know there's a scam where people kind of get stuff they haven't ordered from Amazon so Amazon sellers can get fake reviews. And I thought maybe that was it, but it's nothing to do with the virus. But it wasn't even that either. It's just not addressed. I think the only other thing I could say on a positive, there are some quite nice establishing shots of a kind of like deserted, probably early days of this, wherever it was filmed. It kind of looks quite haunting at times. That was quite nice, some quite nice establishing shots. But man, the whole movie seems pointless, if I'm honest. There's no real story act structure. I think Ruby's kind of mental breakdown is poorly handled. I mean, she just one day starts talking to herself. It's not established if she's got any pre-existing mental conditions, nothing like that. It's just, and then it just seems like wacky and fun. I don't know. And then peripheral characters are just, this movie is well intentioned, I feel, but very, very poorly handled. I'll give it, I wasn't going to say a 2 out of 10, but I'll give it a 3 out of 10 because I do feel the intention here was to try and spotlight how people are struggling. So I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10, and one of them is a charity point. But nonetheless, a 3 out of 10. But this is not an entertaining movie. It's barely a movie. It's just like a series of scenes with virtually no narrative flow. There you go. Have you seen it? Will you watch it if you're in quarantine? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.